don't believe we have meeting minutes from our last technical committee.
Okay. Sweet Condon love.
This is Lisa Philip.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Dave's doing roll call. Oh, we don't have to do roll call.
No, we're not going to do roll call.
Sure, we don't have to do roll call.
And I would skip welcome and introductions as well, since we'll have it in the final transcript.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me not to do that. So good morning, everybody. We'll wait a couple of minutes before we start. Give everybody a chance to join.
Mike Baden.
Morning, Supervisor.
Morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Why don't we do we have a roll call?
I can get one.
Can we just say present, then we don't have to wait for people to introduce themselves. Ed, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to have you still with us, Edward.
Yeah, I'm not going anywhere yet.
We're going to wait just maybe another minute or so, and then we're going to do a modified roll call, so we don't have to listen to everybody's names, and I'll call you off just if you just say
welcome, and thank you for choosing freeconferencecall.com. You're helping people around the world communicate for free. Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign.
Any idea, Dave?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, just
Yep. Ask everyone to mute the phone.
All right. No, not me. Okay. So I think we're going to start. Everybody ready? I'm just going to call names. If you would just answer here, then we would know. So representing the city, representing Ulster County, Ed Pine.
here.
Representing the city of Kingston, anyone?
John Schulteis.
Hi, John. How are you? Representing. Thank you. Representing the town of Saugerties, Vernon Benjamin. John Morrow from the town of Ulster.
Here.
Thank you. And representing the Nice Dot, anyone?
Yes, Andrew Jobson, Amy McKenzie here.
Thank you. Representing New York State Thruway.
Lisa Philip.
Lizzie?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Thank
representing the town of Saugerties, village of Saugerties, I'm sorry. Anyone? Representing the town of Rosendale, Mr. Gallagher, anyone else? Representing the town of Lloyd.
Herb Litz.
Mr. Litz? All right, there you go, Mr. Litz. Representing the town of Plattekill, Mr. Wilkin?
Here.
Representing the village of Ellenville, anybody?
Jean Walsh.
Representing the town of, I'm sorry?
Jean Walsh here.
Hi, Jean, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Representing the village of Ellenville, anyone? Representing the town of New Paltz? Neil? Tim Rogers. Representing the town of Woodstock? Ashley? Mr. McKenna? Mr. Bodden, representing the town of Rochester?
Here.
Anyone representing the Federal Railroad Administration? Anyone representing the Federal Transit Administration? Anyone representing the Federal Highway Administration? Anyone representing New York State Bridge Authority? Anyone representing New York State DEC?
Fred Mastriani of GPI.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So we're gonna mute everyone, and we're gonna do a
Hi,
call for
it's Sue from OFA. I just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you, Sue.
Hey, Dennis, it's Glenn Gadali.
Okay. Anyone else on the phone want to identify on the call? Want to identify themselves?
Diane,
This is Shelley.
Anyone?
Sorry.
Okay, Shelley. Okay. Hearing none. Okay. We're going to do a call for citizens' comments. Is there any citizens' comments? Hearing none. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the technical committee meeting summary for January. We do not have that meeting summary for you, so we're going to skip this agenda item. We'll have it for you for the next technical committee meeting. Communications and announcements, Brian?
I have no communications and announcements at this time.
Any board member have any communications or announcements they want to make? Mr. Litz?
I don't know.
Yes, I'm here.
All right. I thought you had an announcement regarding a bridge.
Oh, yes, I do. I was contacted by the contractor that has the throughway toll elimination project, and he has available the Woodbury pedestrian bridge that crosses over the high-speed highway speed toll in Woodbury. The structure is not that old. There's two spans. It's 122 feet and 68 feet. And it's available if a town or the county or a village or a rail trail, Empire State Rail Trail, is in need of a pedestrian bridge.
Over the track.
So, and would you be the contact through that, Mr. Litz?
Yes.
Okay. So we won't ask for your phone number. If anybody is interested, you can reach out to the Transportation Council. If you reach out to Brian, and Brian will get in contact with Mr. Litz so they can have that conversation if anyone's interested.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. Any other announcements or communications from the technical committee?
Dennis, it's Tom Wilkin.
For the Parkway.
Go ahead, Tom.
I'd just like to say that Route 32 and from Medina down to the county line was repaved. It's nice not being a bobblehead on 32 anymore. You don't get seasick. But the only problem is it's to keep your foot from falling down to the floor on the gas pedal. So I guess they're going to do 4455 as well. So from Chapel Hill over to 208 or Gardner. So that'll be nice also.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Anything else?
I have one after all.
Brian, do you have something?
Yeah, I do, after all, have one brief announcement regarding some administrative issues pertaining to our online meetings. David has set up the freeconferencecall.com link dating back to March when we had to first go to virtual public meetings. And this was the software that we were familiar using at that time, and Zoom really was new to us back in March, so we did want to use it. We've since pretty much adapted to using Zoom within this office. I think many of you have as well. It's a much more popular, more common application than Free Conference Call, and particularly this morning we had some real trouble getting things up and running. So we think after this point in time, we're probably going to switch to using Zoom henceforth for the Transportation Council. And the Ulster County Planning Board has an account, and we've been using that, and that is probably what we will use in the future. So in September, when you go to log on, don't be surprised if you see a different link at that time, and it will be at the top of the agenda.
But we can join by conference call, right?
Yes.
Yeah, by call in only, if that's your preference, that is fine.
Yeah.
And that information will all be on the top of the September agenda.
So, on anything else? Hearing none, on to new business. So before we introduce item A, which is the draft resolution to adopt the Transportation Council's 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan, we thought we would give you an overview of that plan that we were using for the public meetings. We've held 4. So that is coming up on your screen now. For those folks that are joining by just conference call, it's on the website. It's posted on our website.
Yes, that's correct.
So you can go to the planning department, the Transportation Council's website, and you can pull up this meeting so you can follow along.
Listed under the year 2045 Long-Range Transportation Plan project page, and you can find a link there, slides only.
Okay. So I'm going to start, and Brian and I are going to try to share this presentation. We thought we had it down. I tend to screw Brian up occasionally.
Vice versa.
So the Long-Range Transportation Plan is a requirement. It's a federal requirement under from the FHWA and others, and it's required to be updated every 5 years, and it's required to have a minimum of a 20 year horizon, a planning horizon. So we started out, if I can, we started out with the idea that, trying to explain to the public what the Transportation Council is. And David, I'll ask David to advance the slides. So we explain what the Transportation Council is relative to the urbanized area that exists in the city of Kingston, which is an urbanized area that basically formed the Transportation Council in 2003, and then the expansion of that area to essentially the urbanized areas in the southern part of the county, which are part of the Mid-Hudson TMA. And we also explained what the Transportation Management Agency was, Transportation Management Area was, and looked at how the three transportation councils in Poughkeepsie, Dutchess, and Orange County and Ulster County work together. We also noted that a small portion of the planning area for Ulster County actually extends up into Greene County, and the expansion of those urbanized areas in the 2010 census into Woodstock and in areas along of that area. The Transportation Council did, by resolution, establish a planning area for its efforts, and that included all of Ulster County and the area in the county of Greene. So next slide, Brian. David, sorry. So we also explain what a long-range transportation plan is, how it's updated, the fact that it essentially provides guidance for the efforts of the Transportation Council in terms of its capital programming through the TIP, and also strategies for its planning efforts for the next 5 years until it's updated again. And then it also guides all of the actions and products for the Transportation Council's efforts. Next slide, David.
So I just want to go over a few housekeeping issues. As we've mentioned before, through at various points during technical and policy committee meetings, this has been largely a minor update. The content of this plan is, by and large, very much the same as the previous iteration that we completed in 2015, although we did rearrange some sections so it reads better. All 9 sections are shown online right now on the screen. We've consolidated that down so it's one PDF. You don't have to download every single section separately. So all 9 sections are up there along with the table of contents and the appendices that are completed at this point in time. The report has been completed largely in-house by David Stoss and myself over the course of the past several months. And we've simply been updating data when and where it's available and making sure that this current iteration is fully compliant with the existing Transportation Authorization Act, which of course is the FAST Act. The big change since the last iteration is this component requires a system performance plan, which is included in Section 2 of the report. We initially published the initial first draft in early August, and then we commenced our public meetings during I think the second and third week of August. And we have since put a second draft online as of the date that we sent out the packet for the technical committee. The draft is presently open for public comment through the end of August, straight through August 31st. We're accepting comments from the public, including the technical advisory committee, including the UCTC technical committee. After the closing date for public comments, we'll begin to do our final revisions, and we will shoot to have the final draft up by mid-September when we submit the packet out to the policy committee. So that should go out sometime around September 11th or 14th. It's either a Friday or a Monday. And then, of course, the policy committee meets on September the 22nd, and it requires the final approval at that time. Unlike when we do TIP amendments, there's no official public notification required for the approval of the long-range plan. However, we did do public notification for our public meetings that we held in August, and we had roughly 40 individuals attend those public meetings virtually online.
Can you summarize those comments, Brian?
Comments?
Yeah, the main thrust of the comments that we received during the public meeting.
Well, no, I can't.
Okay.
Not at this time. I've received hundreds of comments.
Okay.
Through our online survey tool, we've received hundreds of comments.
Yeah.
Through comments that we received during the virtual public meetings, I mean, they varied significantly, and I don't have them in front of me right now.
Okay. So just some more housekeeping, Brian, if you could explain how the graphic integration of the plan.
Sure. So because we've been working under a relatively tight schedule and timeline, we have hired a public outreach coordinator, Susan Blickstein, and her staff assisted us with the public meetings. And we've essentially tried to get all the public outreach components completed within in August, and so all those have been completed. And so we've been focusing primarily on making sure that the content of this draft document is solid and sound prior to the deadline for completion, which is September 30th, is when we have to have this fully approved. We have also hired a graphic illustrator out of New Paltz, Gilday Design, to assist us with essentially reformatting the entirety of the document, making sure that it is fully ADA compatible for people with visual or audio disabilities. So while we'll have the content approved by the policy committee, we hope, at the meeting on the 22nd, the document will be fully reformatted, and we anticipate that will be completed by Thanksgiving, roughly. So we should have the fully reformatted document in rich text format available to everyone by December.
So I think it's also important to say how we got here, which is why are we under such a tight deadline, and why are we sort of pushing that deadline, and explain to them what happened with respect to our request for, or consideration of a request for an extension, which we thought we were going to get.
Right. Of course, the COVID crisis hit, and we went into lockdown in March, and we're working from home. And throughout that period of time, there are actually several MPOs throughout the state that are have long-range transportation plans that need to be updated this year as well. It was relatively unknown to us whether we would be able to get an extension. The main concern for us was the public outreach component. Would they allow us to do virtual meetings? Would that be allowable given FHWA and FTA guidelines? It was never clear to anyone whether it would be allowed, because all we can do is read the regulations, and unless something is clearly stipulated in the regulations or FTA or FHWA guidance, we have to just go by what's written in the law. We finally did receive guidance last week it indicated that virtual public meetings would be allowed for long-range transportation planning purposes. So that's very reassuring because that was what we were hoping for, and that's what we essentially hung our hats on as we moved forward. We also anticipated to get an extension on the overall deadline for the completion of this report. The report is always due on September 30th for the Ulster County Transportation Council within a 5-year cycle. And we figured we might receive a several-week extension of that deadline, or at least some flexibility. And we received notification in June that there would be no flexibility granted regarding the completion of this plan. So since that point in time, we've been working like gangbusters to get to this point. And overall, I think we're pretty happy with the content of the document and with the public outreach process. While it was, I think, moved into a relatively rapid schedule, it was, I would say, very successful. We had over 300 responses to our survey and a good number of people who were able to attend the virtual public meeting.
Thank you. Well, that's how we got here, so let's move on to the next slide. So what is the purpose of the plan? So a long-range transportation plan is an important component of essentially how an MPO sees the community in terms of its transportation system and how the transportation system can meet the needs and expand on the character of a community. So the first thing that we talk about is a long-range transportation plan is a community vision. The second thing is we look at the alternatives and the constraints associated with the funding that's available and all of the necessary rules that have to be followed in terms of producing the plan and also implementing pieces of it. And last but not least is the important thing about a plan is to try to set within all of the objectives and goals that you have, try to set the priorities within each of those goals and the overall priorities for what you should be doing with respect to the investment in the transportation system. Sure. Okay. So a couple of important considerations. One I mentioned, it's a 25-year plan with only a portion of it to be accomplished within the 5 years. That's why it's updated every 5 years. The main thing that everyone needs to understand is the plan has to be fiscally constrained, which means that essentially we can only include in the plan things which we can pay for. And so beyond that, you're going to hear a lot of discussion about how we've identified the funding and how we made estimates in terms of those funded sources going forward. An acronym. There's an acronym out there that works for most of the efforts that the Transportation Council takes into consideration for most of its efforts, and that is something called SMART, which means that when we look at the recommendations in the plan and we look at how the plan treats investment decisions, they're specific, they're measurable, they're actionable, they're realistic, and last but not least, they're time-bound. Next slide, David.
Quick overview of the public outreach process that we use for this project. Public outreach is a critical component and requirement for the long-range plan update. We hired Susan Blickstein, and as soon as we had a contract executed, we hit the ground running. We began by having 4 focus group sessions with local leaders and people from various organizations from throughout Ulster County. And those provide us with our initial input in early July. And then we're able to open up our public survey tool, which was intentionally very straightforward. I think it only took people about 5 or 10 minutes to complete. And we received over 350 responses, which I think to date is the largest response rate we've gotten for any UCTC project so far. So that was very successful. The purpose of the outreach tool, the survey, was really to try to gauge and validate the goals of the long-range transportation plan as well as the vision statement. And when we look at the results, which are included in the planning document, We saw that 45% of respondents strongly agreed that the vision statement met with their that they agreed with the vision statement. Even a smaller amount, 22%, at least agreed with it. So that we felt was successful, that our vision statement and the goals that were included in the document weren't too far off, and we were generally still in line with everyone's vision. And then, of course, we have a general comment component to the survey tool. If you go to the next slide, Dave.
Next one after that, Dave.
Yeah. We received quite a few comments, and I'm still sifting through many of these. Most, however, I don't recall seeing any major surprises. I think everything was very much in line. 5 main themes we were able to summarize. That expanding public transit coverage was a primary concern. We heard that more than anything. Improving and expanding bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. Providing more alternative transportation options to reduce dependency on single occupancy trips, making the transportation system more sustainable and resilient, and finally strengthening rail trail connectivity in the region. Those were the 5 main themes if we had to categorize all the responses from the public survey tool. And then you can see the word cloud as well that was approved. So, and within a relatively short period of time, Susan Blickstein and her staff really did a great job for us. We're very happy to have their assistance through this process.
Next slide, David. Thank you, Brian. So where do we begin? One of the things that we look at is we look at the transportation demand based on travel patterns, and this map takes a look at those areas in the county that have the most demand, and we're going to overlay a corridor map on that so you can see how that relates to the critical corridors and the major corridors in the county as well. So let's put that up, David. So here's the critical corridors, and if you think the 2 maps together, you can see that where we have the most transportation demand and where the activity centers are, we have the most investment in our transportation system in terms of the types of roads that are on the ground and the types of trails that are there as well when we look at that. So this gives you a sense of the pattern usage versus the investment in the infrastructure. Next slide, David. So the other thing is what happens in terms of where do we think we're going to grow? And we use the county, the planning department's efforts with respect to its open space plan, where we identified priority growth areas. Those are the pink areas on the map. This takes a look at where we think we're going to grow into the future. And then those green dots that are on the map are major projects that the county planning department has reviewed over in the last 5 years. And you can see the major projects in the priority growth areas align together, or they align along the major corridors that essentially are within the county. There's a couple of outliers up in the mountain areas, which are major projects associated with resort facilities. But you can get a good sense that we're literally growing around the major corridors and within the areas that we've identified as priority growth areas. Next slide. Well, this is the fun one. So what ends up happening when we start looking at growth, you begin to think about, well, what do our other partners talk about in terms of where they see the demographics in the county going? And there's some general consensus that if we're going to grow at all, that growth will be gradual. There's a general sense that we will be getting older, that the majority of growth will take place in the activity centers and in the southern portion of the counties generally, and that once we get past the first 10 years in terms of estimates, you can see that the divergence of the lines on this graph in terms of where various entities that project population growth are. And there's even some divergence with the same entities projecting population in terms of what they did 5 years ago versus where they are today. And generally those trends are, if anything, downward, and certainly not very, very aggressively positive. So for the transportation plan, what we've adopted from the Transportation Council's standpoint is a gradual growth rate into the 20s, into the 2030s, and and on into 2045. So you're looking at, there's some things that essentially suggest that even though there's an older population, that there is some trends that suggest that the growth in the county is not necessarily looked at as it relates to population, and there's some suggestion that population will continue to grow. Those are trends that began in 9/11. They went through and intensified with some of the recession that took place in 2008. And then we're seeing it again with respect to what's happening with regard to COVID-19. We're seeing a substantial increase in residential activity and building permits and septic permits throughout the county. We don't know whether that trend will hold, but if it's something like we experienced in 2008, it has a tendency to increase very rapidly and then taper off. So we'll see if that happens. I think for us is remote, the ability to essentially for businesses and others to learn how to work remote and to understand what their productivity is in regard to remote. So we've adopted a small positive growth rate for the transportation plan.
So right now I'm going to walk the audience through some of the major themes within the long-range transportation plan. I'm not going to go down and drill down into specific detail because it's a highly detailed document, roughly 170 page in length. One of the main points that we wanted to stress to members of the public was that this plan is a multimodal surface transportation document, and that it's not dealing with just transit, but we're dealing with obviously cars and pedestrian and cycling systems throughout Ulster County. Next slide, please. So one of the big questions that we like to ask in the transportation plan is how do we travel? This is one of the most important pieces of data that we use, and it's the commute to work information. Obviously, the commute to work is the most significant component of traffic volume on the road during the weekday. And when you look at how we commute to work in Ulster County, 77.2% are reporting in 2018 that we're driving alone in a single occupancy vehicle. So obviously that's going to have a major impact on the amount of traffic volume during certain times of the day throughout Ulster County. And the other, what we call modal shares are shown in the graph as well. And there's quite a bit of information on how we travel to work. Next slide. This piece of data is from what's called the LEHD, longitudinal, forget what the acronym stands for. It's a map and chart that David has put together. And what it shows is that over 43,000 people who live in Ulster County are commuting to work outside of the county. So there very much needs to be a regional focus when we look at the transportation system through the UCTC. It's not just Ulster County. It's looking at the surrounding area and those travel patterns as well. You'll note from the map that we know for a fact that over 10,000 individuals are on a daily basis passing the New York metro region for employment, which is almost the same number of people who are traveling to Dutchess County. So it's very significant. And it also underscores the importance of working with our partners in Dutchess and Orange County through the Mid-Hudson Transportation Management.
And the investment in transit systems, the inter-county transit system.
That's right. Next slide. We also look at the condition of infrastructure in our region to the extent that that information is available. One of the most widely available pieces of data that we have is information on our bridges throughout Ulster County and throughout New York State. And bridges are a major theme throughout the long-range transportation plan. The map shown on the screen shows the location of every bridge within Ulster County, as well as the condition of the bridges. We also know the owner of the bridges. Ulster County Department of Public Works is the largest owner and is responsible for 154 bridges in Ulster County, and a burden that comes with owning so many bridges is that they're going to have a disproportionate share of the maintenance required for those bridges. And there is a significant amount of maintenance that's going to be required within the next 10 to 20 years.
So, and one of the things that we also note is that the bridges that the county owns, a lot of them are what they call off-system bridges. They are on non-federal roads. So if you look at that smattering of bridges that up in the mountains that are, a lot of those are county roads, they're on off-system bridges, which is why the Transportation Council tried to program and did program money in its TIP program for off-system bridge funds. It's also why we really are very much concerned with the Bridge New York program and the Pave New York program relative to off-system bridges.
Next slide, please, Dave. Of course, safety is also a major concern. We've always included basic data regarding safety on the system in previous iterations of the long-range plan. This iteration is unique in that we have been able to dive into the data in far more deeply than we ever have before, primarily because of a project that David Stoss has been managing, looking at doing a crash analysis, working with Cambridge Analytics. And so that project is ongoing, and we were able to draw from some of that data and include it in the long-range plan. So you'll see greater information regarding the location of crashes and the types of crashes that are occurring throughout the county and who is getting into those crashes in terms of what types of drivers, the age of drivers, and whether they're pedestrian, bicycle, or automotive only. And of course, freight is a required component as well. We're looking at where freight originates in Ulster County. And while we look at rail movements within Ulster County, rail freight is largely addressed through the Federal Railroad Administration. So it's not necessarily a subject that the NPO delves into great detail with, but you cannot ignore the fact that West Shore Railroad crosses through Ulster County. And we know, somewhere in the vicinity of 32 freight trains per day traveling through the county, bringing different types of freight, some of which are hazardous materials, and crossing our public roads. So we're taking a detailed look at some of the crash statistics that we have that are occurring at the intersections with our railroad system and our public roadways. And that particular component is still under development. It will be included in the final draft. It's one of the more unusual types of data sources that we have to deal with. So there's some unpacking has been required there.
And it is a major safety concern, and the Transportation Council has program funds to do a safety study on railroads within the city of Kingston that not only deals with its crossing at highways, but also land use around the corridors and where some of the accidents are occurring. I think we've had 4 period of time.
Have at least between 8 to 10 projects programmed using Highway Safety Improvement Program railroad funds. It's a specific section of federal aid specifically intended for making these crossings safer.
Next slide, David.
Long-range transportation plans have, since the early 2000s, been required to include a brief assessment of the impacts of the transportation system on the environment and how the MPO can go about trying to mitigate those impacts. It's generally considered to be a relatively brief component. We've expanded on that requirement and started to take a detailed look at the impacts of climate change within Ulster County and New York State. For the first time, we were able to develop an estimate of greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from on-road transportation sources, specifically in Ulster County. When you think about the single occupancy trips from automobiles, we know that transportation is a major component of greenhouse gas emissions. And using our vehicle miles traveled data, we are able to estimate the amount of emissions that are stemming specifically from those on-road sources. And that's what's shown in the graph on the right.
Can I just,
please?
Good, next slide. I just want to no, that's good. Go ahead, David. I just want to say that the corollary to climate change is transportation resiliency, and this is a new section in the plan. And we're really proud of this section because it starts to think about the transportation system that's much more resilient than currently, and what policies and procedures should be in place in order to allow that to happen. So I'll let Brian go ahead for that.
Well, yeah, Dennis just summarized it very briefly. We addressed the issue of transportation resiliency, and we're going to begin to go into a more detailed, separate planning project later this fall to look at the issue of transportation resiliency and how we can make our transportation facilities more able to withstand these repetitive natural disasters and flooding events that we are likely to see in Ulster County occur more frequently into the future. And next slide. So those are the major themes within the Long-Range Transportation Plan, and they can all be summarized within our goals. And our goals are used to essentially take all the data and public input and also the state and federal guidance and begin to organize it so that we can start to focus on how we turn goals into objectives and then finally implementation. I'm just going to run through them very briefly. System preservation. These are, by the way, listed in no particular order. They're not in order of any priority. System preservation refers to investing in the infrastructure that we have as opposed to building new or expanding on the existing system. This is a preservation first plan, which is something that's been promulgated by the New York State Department of Transportation, and we definitely carry that through this iteration. Economic vitality, making sure the transportation system contributes to economic growth in the region. Safety, as I've mentioned, it's an important component. Whenever we do any study or put forth any capital project through the MPO, we always have to ask ourselves one fundamental question, and that's, will this make the transportation system safer? And that will continue to be a major consideration of the long-range plan and of all of our planning products. Sustainability, ensuring the transportation system does not have a significant impact on the environment. Mobility and reliability, providing for efficient and reliable travel, and that refers largely to mitigating sources of congestion and bottlenecks, which are measured and shown in great detail in the long-range plan. Accessibility and connectivity, creating and maintaining a well-connected system that provides access through Ulster County for people and goods. And that refers to our transit system, our trail system, our roadway system, and also sidewalk system as well. Again, the environment, contributing to making sure Ulster County is a sustainable place by protecting and enhancing the natural and built environment and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, transportation equity. It's important to note this is a new goal that we have included in this iteration of the long-range plan, partially as a result of some of the public input that we received through the public input process, and also some of the comments that we've been receiving over the years. We thought it was important to include this new goal, which refers to developing and integrating strategies that seek to mitigate negative effects related to the transportation system that might impact those most vulnerable communities within Ulster County. And then another consideration is that while in the past we've included performance measures, in fact, I believe all of our previous iterations of the long-range plan have performance measures of some type. This is the first iteration that where we have included performance measures because it's required by the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. So Section 2 includes the system performance report, which really meets the strict requirements of performance measurement. But we also have more performance measures listed under each goal of the transportation plan so that we can continue to measure progress in the implementation of those goals and objectives.
Next slide, David. Thank you, Brian. So one of the reasons that you do goals is that you need to essentially use them to move from goals into strategies and projects. And so the goals helps us set priorities. They help us essentially look at long-term and near-term solutions. And it also takes a look at how we do, what studies we do and how we do investments and how we look at our TIP and look at adding projects or changing projects that are on the TIP. The Transportation Council has been very successful in terms of looking at its efforts with respect to studies and setting the table for additional investment in the transportation system over the years. And if you went through all of our goals from safety to equity to system preservation, you would see an investment in transportation planning that has led to projects, whether it be safety improvements at intersections, changes to investment in the trail system, looking at changes in investments in our transit system. All of those are reflected in studies that the Transportation Council have done, which has led to projects. Next slide.
As Dennis mentioned, it's required that this project be, or the plan rather, be fiscally constrained. So how do we project how much money is going to be available for implementation out 25 years? It's really something of a crystal ball. But we have a few assumptions that we can use going into that. One is that, and the biggest one, is that we're assuming that funding will be held at a flat level into the future. We make that assumption because that's where funding has been for the past several iterations. After Congress has passed Surface Authorization Acts, there have been no significant increases in federal transportation aid available to the state or to the region. So in consultation with the DOT, we've agreed that we have to assume that funding will be flat into the future. So in order to come up with a ballpark estimate, we first look at the existing Transportation Improvement Program, and that's what the donut chart shows you right now. This is what is currently programmed for expenditure within the next 5 years in Ulster County on the Transportation Improvement Program. It's $28 million in FTA funds and $64 million in federal highway funds. This is from various sponsors, local and state, available through a variety of projects and modes. And so we use that baseline funding to then forecast and project in 5-year increments how much money would be available for expenditure into the future. We're able to apply a modest 2% inflation factor to those figures, but overall it's a very modest forecast. It's very conservative, and if you go into Chapter 8, Section 8 of the plan, we can look at the methodology and how much money we project available for implementation in the long range.
So I would want to also add that one of the things that the plan touches on is other sources of funds, which are now playing some important roles in terms of transportation investment. And going back to the resiliency section, disaster recovery funds, DRI monies, have played a major role in investment in bridges in the past, and we'll continue to look at that. In addition, some other New York State funds, particularly through those folks that are dealing with climate change, NYSERDA and others, have played major roles in that funding. One of the examples of that is the Broadway project in Kingston, where some of the effort with respect to re-signalizing those intersections is being paid for by NYSERDA. So there are other sources of funds that are out here that are beyond the control of the Transportation Council, but do play a role in terms of the investment in the transportation system. Next slide. Thanks.
So in conclusion, we don't really have a conclusion to the document, but if I had to summarize some of the main themes that I think are most important in this document. Obviously, it's a preservation first plan. The focus really needs to be on extending the useful life of existing facilities and maintaining the system that we have, because that's all we can afford to do right now. Resiliency is going to be a primary need and focus into the short term and long term, and that story is really best told when we focus on our bridges throughout Ulster County. We really need to focus on securing funds to maintain and improve those bridges so that they are resilient into the future. Safety will be a primary focus as well for all of our planning and capital improvement projects within Ulster County. Improving the safety for all users of the transportation system is a primary goal. And of course, mobility. We've received quite a bit of public input regarding the importance of the transit system. We received a lot of positive comments on how the public feels the transportation system has been improved over the past several years. We've heard some things about how it still is not working well for them, and we're listening to those comments. What is very clear is that the transit system is very important to the public, and we want to make sure that we continue to invest and improve in that system so that it continues to work for the public.
So this is the last slide, and then we have a slide that deals with the ways to participate, but we wanted to end with basically giving you an idea of what we've done to take those goals and turn them into projects. I won't go into any detail. I will tell you that all of those projects that are represented by photos here were originally started by the Transportation Council's efforts, whether it be a transit study, a Broadway study, or a trail study, or other efforts as well. And there are more than these out there. We've done, in the neighborhood of 25 or 30 major studies where we have implementation that is ongoing through investments either by NYSDOT or by local governments. So that's it. I want everybody to take a collective breath. Let me
go over some of the benchmarks one last time, if you don't mind.
No problem.
So in terms of benchmarks for completing and approving this plan, we're on our second draft. We'll be working toward a third and final draft to be available in mid-September. It'll go out to the policy committee through our packet, and so you can look for that around September 14th. At this point, we have nearly met all of our public outreach requirements, which are those requirements are dictated through the operating procedures of the Transportation Council. We have held our public meetings, and now at this point, the document is open to public input, and that deadline for public comment is, again, August 31st. All public comments submitted will be included in an appendix to the report, and if people want those to be anonymous, that's fine. They can indicate as much to me. And then the policy committee meets, assuming the technical committee approves this resolution today, the policy committee will meet on the 22nd of September for the final review and approval at that time. Thank you.
So now we'll take a collective breath and open up the floor for comments before I consider a resolution to advance a motion to advance the resolution. Any comments from the council members? Okay. Hearing none, we're now on resolution number A. It's draft resolution agenda item A, draft resolution 2020-11 to adopt the Ulster County Transportation Council Year 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan, the draft UCTC Year 25 Long Range Transportation Plan. Do I have a motion?
Wilkin.
I'll move it.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Wilkin. Who was the second, please?
Herb Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. So I have a motion and second. I will not ask for approval. I will ask, is there any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, so carried.
Thank you. And thank you, David Stoss, for doing such a great job on that PowerPoint presentation, helping us out with that, and also with all of your work on the long-range plan as well.
So I think I think that's, if I may, Brian, I would like to thank the entire staff and also our consultants for moving essentially. I mean, these folks, we essentially canceled all of our vacation time during the summer to make sure that we could complete this. And these folks have been working sometimes 10 and 12 hours a day trying to make sure that we could put this together and get all the information into this plan to make these deadlines. So I really appreciate it, and I think the council members should be aware of the fact of the effort that's been put forth here. So item B, it's a draft UCTC resolution 2020-12. It's amendment to the UCTC federal fiscal year 2020-2024 TIP program, Transportation Improvement Program, to add a new PIN. That PIN is 893307, John Clark Drive and Morton Boulevard at Boyce's Lane, and the CXX Railroad Crossing is shown in attachment 1. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes? Mr. Morrow? Do I have a motion for discussion purposes?
So moved.
Mr. Litz, thank you. Do I have a second?
Wilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkin. I have a motion and a second. Brian?
Sure. This project is actually in addition to an existing PIN that is dealing directly with the existing PIN 893271, dealing directly with the railroad crossing using the HSIP funds. This project, as described in the project description, will look at coordinating the signal gates with the traffic signals at the project, as well as some pedestrian improvements in the area. So there are two separate projects in the same location in order to solve a problem that was pointed out by the town quite a few years ago, and the Transportation Council completed a study in 2013 to begin to identify some potential solutions for this relatively tricky location in the town of Ulster. The project has been had some trouble moving forward and some fits and starts, and we're very grateful to the New York State Department of Transportation for working hard to identify the source of funding and produce some solutions in order to break us through to the point where we can program the separate project on the tip and address all the issues at this problematic intersection. I don't know, Sandra, do you want to add anything for this project? We had a brief project meeting back in just before the COVID crisis and lockdown hit. I think that was February when this was last discussed.
Yeah, Brian, I just want to add that I think the town is a critical piece too, because although the state, we were able to find some additional money, it's really the town being willing to step up and progress the project was also incredibly helpful. So I think like a lot of people, different moving parts came together, and I think we have a really good project. And the way that I look at the two projects is the one project that's going on right now is being led by the railroad and is making improvements within the railroad right-of-way. And this project that we're adding to the tip today, or talking about adding, is to do improvements just outside of the railroad right-of-way and to tie the two projects together. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And that's a critical point that Sandra made, is that the town has seemed to have a willingness to step up with regard to this. I spoke to the supervisor in terms of where he is on the IPP and moving this forward, and they're just bogged down in other issues right now, but they have an intention in the future to move this forward. So any additional comments? I have a motion and second. No additional comments? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, so carried. Item C is a draft resolution 2020 amendment to the ETC federal fiscal year 2020-24 Transportation Improvement Program TIP to delete PIN number 876027, Beale Street, Fox Street, Hudson Street, Stage 1, as shown in attachment 1, and that's located in the city of Kingston, so everybody understands that. Do I have a motion for discussion purposes? Schulters?
So.
Wilkin?
Yeah.
I have a motion from Mr. Wilkin. Do I have a second?
Alan Aiden.
Thank you, Mr. Aiden. I have a motion, second discussion.
So to explain this project, during this time of year, in working very closely with the DOT, we start to clean up the tip and look at all the projects that are scheduled for construction during this federal fiscal year that might be cutting it close. And then if they're a little close, then we're pushing them, making adjustments in their schedule and pushing them to the next federal fiscal year. And that's for federal tip performance reporting requirements. The Wilbur Ave project is among those. And so,
Beale Street.
Right. But there's two components to this resolution. Anytime we add or remove a project from the tip, it requires an amendment. And the Beale Street project is being removed from the tip, and the city of Kingston has requested that those funds be added to the Wilbur Ave repaving project. And so we're trying to kill two birds with one stone. The Beale Street project, which is not required, there was a small amount of engineering funds left on the tip to address closeout issues. The city does not need those funds. They'll be put on the Wilbur Ave repaving project, and we'll be changing the construction schedule on Wilbur Ave, moving that from federal fiscal year 20 to federal fiscal year 21. And all those actions are shown on the tip strip.
Thank you, Brian. I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion or questions from the council? Hearing none. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carried. Item D is a draft resolution 2020-14, amendment to the UCTC federal fiscal year 2020-2024 Transportation Improvement Program TIP to add a new pin 881540, resurface Route 299 from intersection of Ohioville Road to Route 9W in the town of New Paltz and Lloyd in Ulster County, as shown in Attachment 1. Do I have a motion, Mr.
So
Litz?
moved. Herb Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. I had a feeling you were going to do that. Do I have a second?
Wilkin.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkin. I have a motion and a second. Brian, discussion?
And this is a new project that was given to us a few weeks ago from the New York State Department of Transportation. As it's described, it's resurfacing Route 299 from Ohioville Road to Route 9W in the towns of New Paltz and Lloyd. Sandra, would you like to take a moment to explain this one?
Well, we have what we refer to as our pavement asset team back in the office, and it's a mix of employees from various functional groups throughout our organization. And we had a number of segments of roadway, and these are two segments that our pavement team really wanted to address in Ulster County. So we were able to secure the funds, and we're trying to get them on the tip and would like to get them in construction next year.
Thank you, Sandra. Any additional discussion?
Yes. Will the DOT be looking at that short area from Lily Lake Road to North Chautauqua Lake Road that we submitted a letter to the DOT with the accident history and the possibility of making improvements there to make that section safer?
Well, this is a pavement project, but we can definitely look into that and get back to you. Can you send me or Brian an email specifically with those limits that you just mentioned that you're concerned about? Okay.
Yep. We have that, Sandra. I will.
Yeah, that letter went to Lance, I believe, didn't it?
I thought you were going to send it, Herb. We didn't send a letter. Do you want us to send a letter? We'll send a letter then. We drafted a letter for you.
I think you did send a letter because I gave you the information and then you sent me, you CC'd me on the correspondence with Lance.
Okay. We'll check and make sure that happened.
Yeah, and send me a copy because sometimes what happens if it's a safety issue, Herb, like you're mentioning, that may have gone to our traffic group, not necessarily. I might not have been looped into that. So we'll make the connection between that item and the pavement project and see what opportunities we might have.
Good.
All right, thanks.
Any additional comments? Any additional? I have a motion and a second. Hearing no additional discussion. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So carries. So we're on to item 6 of the agenda, other old business.
That's right. I just want to remind everybody that all of these actions all these TIP actions will be subject to public notice. So we'll be putting an advertisement in the paper and opening them all up to public notice and 15-day public comment period. The last item that we wanted to update the council on, as we mentioned, as part of the long-range transportation planning process, we hired 2 consultants, former Susan Blickstein, to assist us with public outreach, and the other consultant was Gilday Creative out of Blue Coat. And we tasked them with several different tasks associated with the project. The big one is reformatting our document so that it's much more accessible to people with hearing impairments and vision impairments, and also just more accessible to the general public in making it a more readable document that's friendlier to the eyes. So we really look forward to seeing that final iteration, and we're working very closely with them over the course of the next several months. Part of that process is establishing a basis for design, and we're also looking at redeveloping the logo for the Transportation Council. So we have, just to show you right now, very preliminary designs that Gilday provided us about 2 weeks ago. So David, if you could just flip through them briefly. Number 2, we gave them some general input on what we might want to consider in a logo. And these were some of the preliminary designs that they came up with. We can tell you right now we're leaning toward this one, which is number 3, and also number 5. Well, the other ones are nice and definitely have some interesting components to them. This one, for example, was one of my favorites, but it just doesn't look like a good NPO logo. It looks more like a patch for the Boy Scouts for the Appalachian Trail or something like that. But they're going to be working with our comments, and if any of you have any specific input regarding...
Can we mail this to the...
Yeah, sure.
Why don't we'll mail this to you. If anyone has any specific concerns with regard to any logos, let us know. Any particular favorites, let us know that, or any particular design aesthetics that you would think we should consider relative to this. One of the things that's influencing a choice is how it fits on a letterhead, and how it would fit and how it would work in black and white versus color. So we started with black and white, so you can see that there are color versions of these that are out there as well. And the other thing that we're looking at and considering is these are sort of blocky. The idea is we could actually stretch them out across the top of a letterhead rather than block them as they are. So there's a couple of design aesthetics that are being discussed with respect to this. We thought that given where we are right now, 2 things happen. One would be the fact that the county boundary is not necessarily appropriate for the Transportation Council anymore since we extend into Greene County. And it was just time to update that. That logo goes back to, I think, 2004 or 2005.
Yeah, and who was the artist behind that original logo?
That was Uncle Dennis. And I'm not that proud of it.
Yeah, some of the other themes that we told the consultant to consider. We've received a lot of input on the importance of the natural environment in Ulster County and how the transportation system connects us to that and is integral and is a big part of Ulster County. It's a major seeing. So we wanted to see if they could try to integrate images that are representative of the natural environment into the logo as well. We'll see if we can accomplish that. We don't know. And there will be color. These are preliminary. They're just black and white now. Eventually, we'll be adding color.
So any additional comments or business that the council members, the technical committee members would like to discuss?
This is
Hearing
Lizzie Phillips. Lizzie.
Lizzie? Go ahead, Lizzie.
Yeah. Our New York division has a new director since last week, Brent Howard. He was in our list before. Now he came back to New York division as the director.
Great. Okay, thank you. I would also say that and thank NYSDOT. We've been informed by the village town of Saugerties that NYSDOT has completed the study for the southbound intersection between Route 32 and the New York State Thruway, and we're moving to set up another meeting to go over that with the community. And we wanted to thank NYSDOT for that work. And I haven't read through all the report, but I gather there's a recommendation to reactivate the signal at their activated signal. We really appreciate that work by NYSDOT and look forward to that discussion with the community once we get that meeting set up. I want to remind all the council members that the policy committee will meet on September 22nd, 2020. So please check the website and the packet that you received with regard to that. We should have new instructions to direct the meeting for that particular meeting. So I'm going to ask one last time: does anyone have any additional business before the committee?
Dennis, Mike Baden, and just a question I've asked a number of times: is there any new information on Bridge New York program, or is it likely that will not be funded this year?
Sandra?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. We can look into it, but I haven't heard anything.
At least,
okay.
It would be nice. I think it would be nice, Senator, is at least some indication that the department doesn't know. That would be helpful, I think, because these communities are really looking at some bridges that they have to make decisions on, and I know Mike is one of them. To invest in, there's not a lot of money down to invest, so they want to really know whether or not there's any type of money coming down the line with respect to Bridge New York, that they should put some temporary work on the bridge before they actually, with the hope that they're going to get state or federal money.
Okay. No, totally understood. I think the other thing I would just mention is, how are you guys doing with off-system bridge? Do you have any blocks or no?
We have a small block that's out in year 24, I believe, on the tip. It might be 23.
Yeah.
It's really only enough for one bridge.
It's like less than 500,000, or isn't it?
No, it's more than that, but we've had to draw from it to address offsets from our own existing projects. So
we'll get you that number so you have it.
Okay, I only mention it because if there is a community in Ulster County that is dealing with a bridge that they're really concerned about, that's just another option. And 23 would be here before we know it, especially for a bridge project that might need, some incidental right of way. So just something to think about too.
All right. Thank you. That's a great reminder. Thank you, Sandra. We'll look at that. And Mike, if you have any questions with respect to that funding, let us know. We'll give you that number as well so that you have it.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it.
Hearing no other comments or concerns, I wish everyone a safe rest of the summer and a happy Labor Day, and stay well. So I have a motion to adjourn.
Yes, you do, Herb Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Litz. Do I have a second? Mr. Wilkin, I know you're here.
Yeah.
Mike Baden.
All right.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care. Be safe. Be healthy.
Do we finish that in an hour? Hour and a half?